Colin, did you know that there are 27 five-man lineups in the NBA this year that have played at least 200 minutes? And Steph Clay, Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green, and Kevon Looney are still by far the best in the league. They're outscoring teams by 22 points per 100 possessions.
Wow!
5.5 points better than Denver's starters, who are treating this season every game like it's the last game of their lives.
All right, that right there is Jason Timpf, who is the host of Hoops Tonight on the Volume Sports. You hear Colin Cowherd with a hefty laugh in the background. And Jason joins us now, Willard and Steiny, with our special episode here on 95.7 The Game. So, Jason, thanks for coming on. And your comments there beg the question, with that being the case, why aren't the Warriors better?
First of all, thanks for having me on, guys. It's funny when that video was going around the other day, I was genuinely surprised because I thought everybody already knew that specific lineup data was out there, because it was a big deal when Steve Kerr opted to start staggering the starters more with the bench, going to Kevon Looney off the bench. That same starting unit, when you swap out Kevon Looney for Jordan Poole, has not performed super well this year. And I think that's a big part of why Kerr went back. But I really attribute it down to two things. First of all, that lack of road urgency that we've talked a lot about, particularly on the road. And then also, and I'm sure you guys have noticed this, the core five has really struggled to close games this year, which is highly unusual. I think it's just completely a random occurrence because this is a team that has made their bread and butter on executing, out-executing teams on the biggest stages when the pressure is highest. That's literally how they beat Boston last year. So I think those are the two main drivers of it. But, this team doesn't have a ton of depth. And so when they've gotten hit with the handful of different injuries this year that have disrupted things, they just haven't been able to float any real distance between them and 500.
Let me ask you this. And maybe I'm putting you on the spot here, but do you know offhand what five-man unit that's really good has played the most minutes or percentage of their team's minutes together?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't have that data on hand.
That's fine. That's fine. So the Warriors' five-man unit the five-man unit you're talking about has only played together 11% of the time. A lot of that's because they're not together all the time. I think if they're together, they'd play maybe 25 to 28 minutes percent of the game together. Why don't they either finish with that lineup? Because often they don't. And then my question would be, in the playoffs, how much could they play that unit together to maximize that advantage?
Well, it's the classic give and take that modern basketball has been clashing with traditional coaches forever, which is, do you prefer to go big, which gives you a much better chance of withstanding the physical elements of the game, right? Like with Kevon Looney and Draymond Green in the front court, they just have a much better chance of surviving in contested rebound battles and protecting the rim and just in general when it comes to the physicality areas of the game. Or you go to Jordan Poole, which buys you a bunch more, like the aggregate offensive skill of the lineup goes through the ceiling, right? And it opens up so many more things in terms of drive and kick basketball for the Warriors that aren't there. Like starting their actions, whether it's a back cut out of a split cut or some sort of dribble handoff action that gets that first advantage. And then there's so much offensive skill on the floor that they can drive and kick you to death. And there's a bunch of give and take there because then all of a sudden the physical profile of the team falls to, Draymond Green, who's an undersized big, Andrew Wiggins suddenly playing as the, second biggest and most athletic player on the floor. Klay Thompson suddenly as your third tallest player starts to present some physical limitations. So it's just that classic give and take. I kind of see both sides of it. And I think it's matchup dependent. Like there are going to be situations where they need to stay small. But I thought more often than not they did go with Kevon Looney in the playoffs last year, and I thought it ended well. And honestly, this is where Gary Payton is going to be a huge advantage because I think one of the ways that they can kind of fight this a little bit is in some of these closing groups when Gary Payton is ready, going with him instead of Jordan Poole. And then you're smaller, but Gary Payton plays so much bigger than he is, and he does a lot of things that functionally represent what a perimeter player can do. And I think that's a big part of why they were so good in last year's playoffs with Gary Payton. They were way better in last year's playoff run with Gary Payton on the floor than when he was on the bench.
So, Jason, I'm torn here, and maybe you can help. Like we're watching this team every single night, and there's that data, which is that group of five is still the best in the league. The other side is defensively, this is a middle of the road team at best, and that doesn't work to win championships. So, are you of the belief that blessed with health, this is still a championship contender or not?
Absolutely, like unquestionably. I again, like you get concerned about stuff with the defense because what we hear about in NBA history, or what we know from NBA history, is that if you are not a top 10 defense and you don't have an overwhelming talent advantage, meaning I've got KD and Steph, or I've got Shaq and Kobe, right? Like if I don't have an overwhelming talent advantage and I'm not a top 10 defense, that's a problem. And obviously, we're going to want to see Golden State address that over the course of the last month and a half of the regular season. They really need to dial in the defensive details. That goes without saying. But generally speaking, I am super bullish on championship cores that have demonstrated that they have that ceiling in the past. I'm a big believer in motivational advantage in the regular season. Like Denver is attacking this season, like it kind of reminds me of the 2018 Rockets. Like they just have so much night in and night out belief and passion in what they're doing, because it's all very new for them to be in this situation. And like Golden State, more or less, obviously the Gary Payton and Otto Porter losses off the bench have affected them this year, but more or less it's the same core of players that was, one of the best defenses in the league last year and went on this dominant playoff run. They're obviously in a very deep NBA going to struggle with night in and night out motivation. You're really seeing that on the road. So I am a believer that this core can snap back into form. And as far as depth goes, like when you look at JaMychal Green and how well he's been playing over the course of the last month, I'm not necessarily concerned about, like they might have to look at the buyout market for depth, but the core 9 guys with Jordan Poole and Dante DiVincenzo and Jonathan Kuminga and JaMychal Green coming off the bench, I don't think they need any more. It's just a question of them dialing in the details of the final 2 months. And if they were in a first-round series at 8-1 against Denver, I am leaning towards picking Golden State to win that kind of series.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, Jason, you seem like you're a good guy, so I'm going to give you an opportunity here. Not
Watch
Mark,
out, Jason.
Not Mark, my partner today, because we usually don't work together. But I have a partner. His name's Daryl the Guru Johnson, and we made a bet. And the bet is I have the field, and he has the Warriors. You want to make that bet? I'll take the field. You take the Warriors.
Oh, man, I don't know if I'd go that far.
Right.
So the thing is,
I'm messing.
There's all these new wrinkles. There's all these new wrinkles in the West, right? Because like Phoenix is this new team on the scene, and they have their own set of issues, but the top-end talent is there. I don't know if you saw the Lakers last Thursday night with all their new – it was the first time we saw their new pieces with LeBron and AD. They looked pretty good. Obviously, they're going to have to show us a lot more. The Clippers I'm not as worried about, but Denver and Phoenix and Golden State at the top, I kind of put them on the same tier. And so with having 2 other teams on the same tier with them, I would have a hard time taking them over the field.
That is a correct answer, by the way. I think I would do that.
Barnum and Bailey say?
Is there any team in the NBA where you wouldn't take the field? Like nobody's better than 50-50, right?
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
Like, even out east, it's like Philly is a lot better than Philly. Basically, has been the best team in the league for the last half of the season, and it's completely under the radar. In their last 37 games or something like that, they have the best record in the league. Joel Embiid and James Harden are both playing incredible basketball. Like the Eastern Conference is just as up in the air. This whole thing is completely up in the air, which is why I think, guys, that we had such a wild trade deadline.
Jason Timpf, who is with the Volume Sports Network, host of Hoops Tonight, is with us here on 95.7 The Game. You mentioned the buyout market there real quick, Jason. Do you think there's anything there for the Warriors?
It's just a matter of depth. The 2 names that have been floated around, Patrick Beverley, the thing is you guys have so many guards already. And the other thing, too, is Patrick Beverley he's a ball stopper. He's that guy who catches on the wing, and the first thing he does is pump fake and jab step, which I think would give Steve Kerr a heart attack, because he's just such a big believer in making quick decisions with the basketball in your hands when you catch on the perimeter. But I do think he's a good player who could step in and play minutes if you needed him. I look at, like, Serge Ibaka it's like it makes a lot of sense on paper. They need a backup big just to help eat innings over the course of the last month and a half. But the other thing they're really going to fight against, guys, is minutes. I really think that guys prioritize minutes because they want to play basketball. And at the end of the day, I think that Kerr is going to go with Jermichael Green. I think Kerr is going to go with a little bit of Jonathan Kuminga and a lot of Gary Payton and a lot of Dante DiVincenzo and Jordan Poole. So, like, I just don't understand the advantage that Golden State presents to a buyout candidate. It would make a little bit more sense if, like, Kevon Looney was hurt right now and, like, Serge Ibaka, you could go to him and be like, hey, like, you're going to play right away. But I'm just not sure there's minutes available, and that's going to put them at a disadvantage in a lot of ways there.
Let me ask you this. Last year, the Warriors were 41-13 through 54 games, and they were getting Clay back, and then Draymond got hurt for about 30. Steph, of course, missed the last 11. They got whole for the playoffs, and they had a core that had been together. This year, they're 29-29. They're working significantly harder for wins than they ever have, I think, during their dynasty. Do you take into account anything like that where the effort they're putting in right now to get to the playoffs and even the run that they're going to have to make right now, assuming they want to get up to 6, will take a toll on a veteran team during the postseason?
Absolutely, it will. I mean, that's the biggest thing standing in the way for both Golden State and the Lakers. Like, I'm such a believer in their talent, and, like, for the record, that's where my optimism comes from. You know, like, do we think Jordan Poole has declined? Obviously not. Steph's having a better regular season than he did last year. Do you guys remember how poorly he shot the basketball last year? Like, that was a huge subplot that he erased in that postseason run. You know, Draymond Green is in a much better physical position than he was last year. I think Klay Thompson's playing better regular season basketball than he did last year. So there's something in the synergy of all that, particularly like we talked about, closing games, effort on the road, you know, bench depth that have caused problems. But I don't see anything in the personnel that has led me to believe that group has declined. So that pushes me to thinking they just need to lock in. But the aspect of that is a big question mark, you know, much more so for the Lakers because, you know, Anthony Davis can barely play 15 games in a row without having an issue. But, you know, it's a lot to ask from the middle of February all the way through to the middle of June for that group to hit the Jets, especially when Denver can rest Nikola Jokic if they need to, right? And Boston can, you know, be like, oh, we're just going to go into Milwaukee with 4 of our starters out, and we're still going to have a chance to win because we have all this depth, you know. And same thing goes for Milwaukee. Like, it's just, they're in this predicament now where they are not afforded the luxury of being able to ease their way into the postseason. And that just adds a whole other – it'll make them tough in a first-round series because they'll be so locked in on the details. But in terms of the 4 straight months of high-level basketball they'll have to play, it just adds so much more room for something to go wrong.
Jason, real quick, that All-Star game, hot garbage, right? Like, what do they do with this?
I don't know what to do, to be honest with you, man. Like, I as a basketball purist, I find it, like, objectively unwatchable.
Totally.
Like, I'm as big a basketball fan as you'll find, and I did not watch the game last night. I watched, you know, maybe 5 minutes of it, and I was like, oh, it's one of these kinds of games. And then I turned it on at the end because I'm a huge believer in the Elam ending. I think the Elam ending is the future of basketball. I love the idea of winning basketball games by playing basketball instead of, hey, let's, like, foul and jack up a 3 real quick. I love the Elam ending, so I always tune back in there. And they weren't even playing defense for that. Right. I was like, oh man, we have lost the plot here. But I mean, at the end of the day, like, what I would say to fans is they don't care, so you probably shouldn't care. Like, don't set yourself up for disappointment by caring more than those players do. They clearly don't care about the game, and it's headed quickly towards being the Pro Bowl, basically.
Yep. Yeah, you said the exact same thing I did, which is if you don't care, why should we? And they looked bored as all get out yesterday, so that's what I did. I got out. Yeah.
You, brother.
Yeah. Jason, hey, man, a whole lot of fun. Thank you for coming on.
Anytime. I appreciate the invite, guys.
All right, we'll do it again. That's Jason Timpf, Hoops Tonight, Volume Sports.